welcome to Countdown 2019 NG on Nigeria Info 99.3, where we feature all the big and significant issues on the road to the 2019 elections. Remember, you can follow the program on Twitter at Countdown 2019 NG and myself, Rotimi Sankore, at Rotimi Sankore. You can also tweet at us using the program handle, my handle, or the station handle at Nigeria Info FM. Our big topic today, both on the idea segment of the program and on the second half, is the party primaries. What happened during the party primaries? Many questions about the party primaries. Different political parties utilized different variations of the primary system to elect or select candidates. We are going to be talking about those. With us in the studio today is Ayobe, legal practitioner and democracy advocate.
Good afternoon, Rotimi.
Okay. And you can follow Ayobe on Twitter at Nijama.
And you can also follow the Ideas segment of the program on at Ideas Radio NG.
Okay. All right. We're going to have a guest on the telephone. Tell us.
Yeah, Rotimi, as you know, the last week we talked about one particular party's primaries and how they tried to deal with the issues of integrity, ethics, accountability in their own method of selection of candidates. But today I think we want to have a more broad look at what's going on or what went on in the primaries, because of course the primary season is over. And so our guest today is the Executive Chairman of the Center for Anti-Corruption and Open Leadership, CACO, and he is Debo Adeniran.
Okay, so Debo will be joining us on the telephone shortly. But four of the first issues that we are going to be taking, including with Debo, what method of primaries fits more with integrity, democracy, ethics, and accountability? What are the pros and cons of each method? There are the direct primaries, where every member of the party votes directly for the party's candidates. There is the indirect primaries, which Nigeria has been more familiar with. It's called the delegate system. And then there is the consensus candidate. And also a very awkward one, but which many parties have used, including the ruling party, the sole candidate or affirmation, where the party just affirms and says, this is our candidate and we have confidence in the person. So while we are waiting for Debo Adeniran to join us by telephone, Ayo and I will talk about these four options.
Well, I think, to me, that I think that when we look at the issue of sole candidate, we need to understand that the way the ruling party priced the cost of even becoming an aspirant for their party ticket
at 45 million naira.
At 45 million naira. It's not I wouldn't so much call it as affirmation as everybody else who has a 45 million naira going spare probably felt that they had better use to put it to than to go up against somebody who was obviously or most likely to win, at least within that party. So I think that's one thing that it wasn't so much affirmation. It was just, there was only one candidate. So what?
Okay, we have Mr. Adeniran on now. Hello, Mr. Adeniran.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So you are live on 99.3 with me, Rotimi Sankore, and with Ayobe.
Okay.
All right, excellent. So Ayo, please go ahead.
Yeah, so Debo, thank you very much for joining us on the Ideas segment of the show. And what we've been trying to assess is which of the various methods of getting a candidate is most likely to throw up or to put the issues of integrity, ethics and accountability into play. Now, you would have heard Rotimi and I, we were just discussing whether the APC really had just an affirmation, or whether the way that they had priced their own nomination forms at 45 million meant that only somebody with money to burn would think of going up against somebody who was like an incumbent president, who was most likely to become the candidate. But you may want to comment on whether that speaks well for accountability and ethics. But we also had the issue of consensus candidates, where people were busy stepping down all over each other for the praise. We had the question of direct primaries and indirect primaries. Now, while some argue that direct primaries are more democratic, it's a question whether they are equally supportive of the issues of integrity, ethics, and accountability. But we also see that the indirect primaries have their issues. Would you like to comment on some of these methods?
That's right. Thank you very much for having me. First and foremost, the way political parties are run in Nigeria is like an napkin to bamboozle people while getting favored. Those candidates that are favored by party leaders to contest elections, by hook or by crook, not by the choice of the membership of political party. Yes, we believe, at our own level, we believe that direct primary will be democratic, will be more participatory. However, most of the direct primaries that are held, even by the ruling party, are done without authentic membership register. And there is nothing to prove that the number of those who registered were the same number of those who voted in those elections. Meaning that it couldn't have been fair on some of us upon whoever the so elected we govern on. If membership of the parties are involved, it will give sense of belonging, and we will be so sure. As a matter of fact, we who are apolitical, will even love these members of who we think will be a good candidate for the position that is being considered. But when we do not have party register, we do not have those who are actual members, we do not have means of verifying authentic, cards.
On that point, Debo, I think that one thing that one thing that has baffled many people, particularly with regard to the APC, and of course we have to remember that it's not only for the presidential position that we have primaries, but it was very noticeable that while in Lagos State, it was said that 1.9 million people voted to affirm the incumbent President Buhari as the candidate. When it came now to a very hotly contested, or at least it was supposed to be hotly contested, gubernatorial election, it's been difficult to get the actual numbers of those who participated in those elections, certainly to the extent of being able to say whether 1.9 million people voted, whether some of them voted for the person who emerged as winner, or whether some of them voted for the person who is the incumbent governor.
Well, the officially declared results is less than 1 million for both candidates.
This is the problem. It does speak to your issue of the inability to have an authentic list of the electorate in that particular selection or that particular.
Because what they did in Lagos was kind of a coronation, actually, not primary election by any standard.
Are you talking about the governorship or the presidential or the Senate?
The one for presidential, nobody actually knows when it took place, and whatever number people their banks are at, but for property story that they claim happened, those national working committee
Well, we do know that where INEC says that it was not part of the primaries of a party, or when it was invited for primaries and the primaries did not take place, INEC has said that the party involved, in which case we're talking about the Zamfara primaries of the APC, that as far as they're concerned, they have not held primaries and will not be able to present candidates. So, it is possible for us to expect that if INEC did not participate, then it should be able to say so. But what I'd really like you to speak to, Debo, is the question of these different methods of choosing candidates. The methods themselves, how open are they to charges of corruption? And then the selection of candidates. I mean, we had some parties that did written examinations for their prospective candidates and so on. To what extent do you think that parties are really paying attention to the idea or to the necessity, as some of us might think, of getting candidates who will really be able to stand up under the scrutiny of integrity, accountability, and ethics?
I believe that the best way to choose a candidate is through direct primary, where we have authentic register that will be confirmed by the participants, that is, the members of the political party. There should be a way of verifying or authenticating the membership, just like accreditation. However, what happens is within party that just line of party that was on record that there are some cases where somebody will just come in front and say that nobody will be allowed to put a particular candidate in this place. That shows that what is democratic. Now, I think what we should do now is to advocate that every party and every membership card such that you carry a key that can be confirmed by the card reader. And when the next primary is supposed to be held, all of the accreditation should be done the way INEC does accreditation.
But don't you think, Debo, that will put an extremely high burden on parties? I mean, you've been talking about what happened in Lagos, but let's not forget that there are several political parties that are in this race. And there are several political parties in this race, and they don't all have the kind of resources that the ruling party or the former ruling party have. And this could be a very big burden on them.
This is where monetization of electioneering is correct. And government should be ready to foot the bill of even party membership card. Okay? It doesn't have to, once you register a political party, you should be ready to verify their membership and
You see, Debo, I'd like to.
That's a lot to ask of INEC.
Yes, it's a lot to ask of INEC. But also, I think that there's a risk. Don't you think that there's a risk of parties being turned into basically government parastatals? And
it's not, because we are ready. I mean, government is registering political parties, and once they fulfill the conditions for registration of a political party, means that they are qualified for whatever subvention government is supposed to grant political parties. And since one person should not be allowed to belong to more than one political party, it means that all of those politicians will be declined. They are registered to be declined and will be controlled.
sorry, is it a regulation that one is not entitled to belong to more than one political party? What happens to the safety net that many politicians, or the parachute that many politicians who have been unsuccessful in one place? Yes, but they may have. But when parties have regulations about the length of time one has to have been a member, if you don't maintain dual memberships, you could find yourself up the creek without a paddle.
Well, we are just talking about what would be ideal. A situation whereby somebody can belong to more than one political party should not be seen as being ideal, because it will give room for fraudulent and electoral, kind of
Well, the Constitution gives us freedom of association. But I'd like you to, you've talked about your desire for direct primaries. To what extent do you think that indirect primaries upholds or diminishes the virtues of integrity, ethics, and accountability? Are they immune from it? Are there ways of insulating them from the corruption charge?
Especially taking into context what we know about the delegate system.
That's right. You see, delegate system is, denies the people of their right to choose, because the delegate can be quartered in a posh hotel and be coached.
Sorry, aren't the delegates themselves elected by the members of the party?
The process of determining who a delegate is also questionable to the extent that some of them got to position or at the elected position through means that is not so clear, and all of this will give them a better advantage over other members.
Sorry, Debo, if I may chip in and clarify, the point Debo is making there now is that there are delegates that are not elected but are automatic delegates because they are governors, senators, House of Rep, local government chair,
That's what
councillors.
in the US they call super delegates.
Super delegates, yes. And many parties here use that, especially the two parties that have been in power at federal and state governments. Yes.
Now, so these super delegates are not there to represent the interest of those who sustain them in power. And that is the reason why it becomes difficult for us to, it's difficult for those delegates to play, in the direction dictated, that is dictated by the hierarchy of membership. But if it is direct primary, you can actually determine what direction the voting pattern will go. Then you cannot quarter all the members of the political party in a hotel, which is due to bribing them or coercing them into voting towards a particular direction. It has happened in some smaller political parties where everybody was allowed to enjoy his own right of choice. But in some bigger political parties, people were dictated to that you don't have to queue behind certain people. Those who use delegate system, they gave advanced information on who to vote for and how to do the voting in such a way that it would look credible when they knew that a lot of manipulation has taken place. And there are a number of states that experience that. And that means that it's not the choice of the political party. The problem political parties have in Nigeria is because they don't have particular ideology. And this is why we are advocating that before a political party is registered, INEC will ensure that there is a clear-cut ideology.
The thing is, Debo, with the reality is that every political party has to sign up to Chapter 2 of the Nigerian Constitution. And basically that means that they have to all promise that they're going to provide food, education, shelter, and so on. But we're coming to the end of our segment, and I'd just like you to discuss a little bit about, because in some political parties, what we just heard was that somebody has emerged as the candidate. And I just wonder whether, in the end, if a party wants to be sure that it puts up a candidate who embodies the ideals for it of integrity and accountability, somebody whose ethics are seen as commendable, isn't that really? It may not be the most democratic, because sometimes the people who are popular don't necessarily embody those ideals. So how do we strike that balance?
Well, that is why I said that we have to look into the guidelines for registration of political parties. Maybe we are going to recommend that candidates will not just be mad. Candidates should be affirmed, even if you be sole aspirant for that position. And you have to be, the affirmation has to be done in the open. Not that somebody will know that nomination will close tomorrow and will make himself or herself the presidential candidate. Not that somebody had enough resources to register a political party, even when all of the conditions for registration were not verified, and make himself the chairman of the party and make himself the presidential candidate and nominate those who will run for other political offices because he will afford to fund their campaign. So it is the rule that is to follow, and that which we have to be spending for our future elections. And that is the only way by which we can hold people accountable for their performance in the office. If they don't provide what they promise, then we should be, Nigerian people will have legitimacy when they are the question that, look, this is what you ought to do. And that is why we are talking in terms of ideology to be part and parcel of the conditions with which political parties are registered. It doesn't
Well-
matter how much education somebody has made for
Well, Debo, I have to, because we've overrun our little segment here, and so I want to thank you very much. Definitely the issue of party primaries and whether they just put the issues of integrity, ethics, and accountability aside, and then the candidates now come out and start burnishing their credentials in that regard, I can't say. We will have to examine that a little bit further. But thank you very much, Debo Adeniran, the Executive Chairman of CACO, the Center for Anti-Corruption and Open Leadership. Thank you very much. Rotimi, back to you.
Yeah. Well, some very interesting points made by Debo Adeniran there, but what he was saying about candidates should be affirmed in the open, I wasn't quite clear what that point means, because the affirmations that have been done, parties presented people
Yes.
and said, we are affirming this person's candidacy.
I think in the end,
And it's not quite clear, especially those that emerged. I mean, there have been lots of jokes about how did they emerge.
they're all assailants. They sprang fully formed from the
Yes.
head of their father.
Yes.
But to be serious, I think it's a problem, because sometimes one is not able to. One doesn't have the resources for a popular contest in that way within a political party, and that's why you find that some of the smaller parties tend to be formed around a particular person, and then that person becomes the candidate. It's not that others are prevented from contesting, but that it's basically known that this party is formed for the purpose of making this person the presidential candidate. I think that when we get onto the other side of the campaigning issue, then we will be able to see the extent to which being the only big fish in a very small pond will equip one to be able to withstand what happens when you want to govern. Because I'm speaking as somebody who remembers the case of Balarabe Musa, who was elected governor of Kaduna State, but he did not control his State House of Assembly.
Assembly, yeah.
He could not even get his commissioners confirmed by the House of Assembly. So there are dangers on both sides if you haven't really got a solid organization fielding candidates at every level.
Well, that's, as you've pointed out, there is an even bigger danger that even the very best of people could emerge as president from any party, but if they have zero or low influence in the National Assembly, things could just become ungovernable. As in fact, Balarabe was impeached by his own House of Assembly.
He was impeached and removed.
Yes, even though he was popularly elected on the platform of the PRP, People's Redemption Party.
Yes.
So it's a big lesson for a lot of candidates today regarding not just winning tickets and contesting elections, but if you are the only candidate and you don't have enough candidates in the National Assembly or House of Assembly, you could be in serious trouble.
I think that a lot of people are looking to the situation as it happened in France with President Emmanuel Macron. Of course, he was an established politician, and many of the people I should say that we see running have held political office in one way or the other. But having emerged as having won the presidential election, he then put out a call. En marche, we're on our journey. Come with us, and asking for candidates.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much.
In Nigeria, unfortunately.
Thank you so much, Ayobe. Okay, so stay tuned. On the second half, we'll continue the discussion and hopefully take your comments on the party primaries. 3 minutes.